Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia, home of the Melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys my first ever Shaddoll Melodious deck profile. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into this. So starting off, we are of course playing with our Melodious Monsters. Now this lineup is fairly standard for a hybrid sort of deck that isn't purely focused on the archetype. So starting off, we're playing one copy of Arya, the Melodious Diva. She's here as kind of an ostinato target, so you can bring her out alongside of anything else that you really want, depending on the situation, and she can help protect your field and act as kind of a backbone for the deck. Next off, we're playing two copies of Soprano, the Melodious Songstress. Now, if you do draw into a Melodious Monster that you want to normal summon, she's probably the one you want to draw into, because of the fact that she allows you to facilitate fusion summons and the like. Next off, we're playing two copies of Cannon, the Melodious Diva. Now, Cannon is here as a kind of a way to help you swarm the field. You don't really want three copies of her because the fact that she could clog your hand. And also, this build is kind of tight because you also are playing a lot of Shaddoll monsters that you're going to use to fuse with. Next off, we're playing three copies of Sonata, the Melodious Diva. Now, Sonata's here at 3 because unlike Cannon, you can actually summon multiple copies of her from your hand if you control Melodious Monster. Cannon's limited to once per turn, which is the reason why she kind of gets cloggy. But 3 copies of Sonata is really good for helping you push for some damage and also just allowing you to get some extra bodies on the field for your Soprano. Next off, we're also playing one copy of Elegy, the Melodious Diva. I really don't like Elegy as a card, but in this deck, it actually kind of works out because of the fact that Elegy can be fused with Polymerization, which we are playing. Because this deck is kind of a weird deck, but you guys will see what I'm talking about once you get to the fusion spells. But yeah, one copy of Elegy because you can fuse from the hand in this deck, so it's a little bit more consistent in terms of getting bodies onto your side of the field. But yeah. Anyway, we're also playing one copy of Chopina, the Melodious Maestra. This is your ostinato target for getting Bloom Diva or Bloom Prima to your side of the field, but also you can just fuse with her from the hand as well, using things like Polymerization. And again, we'll get into that in just a bit. But yeah, that's going to be it for the Melodious Monsters. Quite a few of them, I believe there's 10. Next off, we're going to move on into the Shaddolls. So for the Shaddolls, because Construct is off the list, Shaddoll Melodious is actually going to be a thing because the fact that we can obviously summon Construct because we have light monsters in the deck. So what we're going to be doing is we're playing one copy of Shaddoll Falco. This is a recurring monster that comes back from the graveyard if you use as a fusion material or gets destroyed by a card effect, which is kind of nice. Its flip effect is that you can revive a Shaddoll monster from your graveyard and special summon it in face down defense position, which allows them to also flip, but you can also bring back some of your fusion monsters as well, such as a Window or a Construct or whatever that has previously been destroyed. Okay, so next off, we're also playing two copies of Shaddoll Hedgehog. Now, Hedgehog is a great card in this deck because the fact that it allows you to search out your Shaddoll monsters if it's destroyed by a card effect, and its flip effect allows you to actually search out a Shaddoll spell or trap card. Most notably is the card is going to be Shaddoll Fusion, which allows you to basically fusion summon from your extra deck by using monsters from your deck as material, as long as your opponent controls an extra deck monster, which is actually fairly common nowadays. So yeah, it's almost always live, right? Unless you're going first. Okay, next off, we're playing one copy of Shaddoll Squamata. Squamata is a card that's here kind of as a utility and a deck thinner. Its flip effect allows you to destroy a monster that your opponent controls, which is kind of nice. And its graveyard effect, if it's sent there by a card effect, is that you can send another Shaddoll monster from your deck to your graveyard, which can actually help you thin out some cards from your deck while toolboxing other Shaddoll monsters from your deck. So, you know, if you send a Hedgehog, you can get a search. If you send a Falco, you get a revive. Or you can send something like one of your two Shaddoll Dragons. Now, Shaddoll Dragon's flip effect is that you can target a card your opponent controls and return it back to the hand. It's really good for getting rid of some really annoying monsters on your opponent's side of the field, so that's fairly good. But it can also, if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target one spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy it. So that's also just really good spot removal and really good utility in that card. Now, next off, the last Shaddoll monster, we're playing one copy of Shaddoll Beast. I don't feel like you need any more than this, but you're welcome to play 2 if you really want the draw power, but I just find that it clogs more often than not. Usually I send this off of something like Squamata, so I can get that extra draw. Its flip effect is that you draw 2, discard 1, and if it's just sent to the graveyard by card effect, like by fusion summoning or whatever, you just draw an extra card. So it's pretty nice. The Shaddoll engine is really good for generating advantage over time for kind of disrupting your opponent by popping some of their things. But yeah, overall, fairly good ratios. I found that you don't really need more than this because there is a card in our spell lineup that allows you to recover some of these Shaddoll monsters from your graveyard, or any monsters from your graveyard if you use them as fusion material. So we'll get to that in just a bit. Okay, so next off we're playing, for our kind of tech cards, we're playing 3 copies of Dino or Pinkertops. Now, I don't have the copies right now, but 3 copies of Pinkertops is really good, not only because it's an Earth attribute, which allows you to access Shekinaga from your extra deck, but it's also just really good spot removal, 2600 attack as a body, so it's really nice for attacking over something, then tributing itself off and popping something your opponent controls. So it's like a 1 for 2 in your best case scenario. In a worst case scenario, you just special summon it to your side of the field and pop something your opponent controls, so it's a 1 for 1. Really good spot removal, can act as monster removal or spell and trap removal, which is why I really do like it. But yeah, 3 copies of those. Now, the last monster that we're playing in this deck is actually going to be a hand trap, so we're playing 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, which I have not gotten my copies of from the structure deck yet and sold my ultras, but anyway, that's besides the point, because you can actually play any kind of hand trap that you want. Now, the reason I play Ash Blossom here is it's a kind of catch-all hand trap, so this deck's not really meant for competitive play, it's really meant for casual play, and stuff like Droll and Lockbird, while it's good against the meta right now, against stuff like Salamangreats, it's also not really great against casual decks, because not all of them are really hyper consistent with searching and things like that. So 3 copies of Ash Blossom is great, but Ash Blossom is also a fire attribute, which allows you to access Grista from your extra deck. Now, Grista is more of a situational Shaddoll fusion monster, but I do find that's really nice if you can get a wind into Grista on your side of the field. You can do that special summon lock that was infamous back in the day. But yeah, that's definitely a thing that can happen, and it's also nice to just have more variety of fusions that you can access. So Ash Blossom is definitely a reason why I play that. So yeah, but feel free to play any hand trap that you want. Anyway, that's going to be it for the monsters. Next off, we're going to move on into the spell cards. So for the spell cards, starting off, we're of course, because we're playing with Melodious, we're playing 3 copies of Ostinato. Ostinato is here to help you summon out any of your Melodious fusion monsters from your extra deck to your side of the field. Really great for establishing Aria and Elegy onto your side of the field if you so fancy that. I prefer usually getting a Bloom Prima out and then summoning the Aria with a Chopino, which allows me to start recurring resources on my next turn if I start going for some fusion plays, which is actually very easy to do once we get into some of the other cards. But yeah, Ostinato, just a fantastic starter card, and you know, you can always link away your Bloom Prima, recover some Melodious monsters from your graveyard, establish a Shaddoll field, something of that sort. It's a very versatile deck, and I actually really do like this build. Next off, we're playing 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. Now, Shaddoll Fusion, the bread and butter of any Shaddoll deck, right? This allows you to fuse using materials from your deck as long as your opponent controls a monster special summon from the extra deck, which is fairly common, right? So Shaddoll Fusion is a really great card, allows you to tap into a lot of extra deck potential, things like Floodgates and Winda, more offensive strategies with Construct, you know, more control-based strategies with Shekinaga. There's so many different options that you can go for here, so it's really nice. And I'm also playing 1 copy of El Shaddoll Fusion. You only need 1 copy in this deck. I know more dedicated Shaddoll builds play like 2 or 3 because you do just want to see those fusion cards. But because we have other means of fusioning in this deck, El Shaddoll Fusion is really just here as a toolbox thing where we can go ahead and push for some more damage in the battle phase. It's not really meant to be you know, a huge part of this build. Now, we are playing 1 copy of a normal Polymerization. There's a reason for this, is because I play Fusion Recycling Plant in this deck, and that's one of the ways that we can actually recover Melodious monsters and Shaddoll monsters from our graveyard after we fusioned with them. And you only need 1 copy of Polymerization because Fusion Recycling Plant not only searches it from the deck, but it can also recover it back from the graveyard by adding it to your hand as long as you're discarding a card for it. So it's really good. Polymerization is probably not the, you know, best fusion spell card out there in the game, especially compared to stuff like Ostinato and Shaddoll Fusion, right? But it's very consistent because of Fusion Recycling Plant, and you only need 1 copy, so it's really flexible in this build, right? You can still put a lot of other things in here, and this is not really intrusive to the consistency of everything. But this allows you to fuse for things on your side of the field, in your hand, which is really good, even if you control monsters on your side of the field. So, you know, if you draw into Chopina, and you have another Melodious monster on your field or in your hand, you can play play this and get a Bloom Diva onto your side of the field, it's just very nice to have that option to go for, rather than just having to, you know, rely on keeping Shopina in the deck, drawing Ostinato while you control no monster on your side of the field. You see how it gets kind of more situational there. So Polymerization helps fix those types of issues, and because we have Shaddolls in here, it's really easy for us to access other things as well besides the Melodious Fusions, so there's a lot of versatility. And the last card I'm playing here for the fusions, for the fusion spells, I should say, is Super Polymerization, obviously. Now, I don't have my copy here, I'm proxying it, but Super Polymerization allows you to fuse with your opponent's monsters as well, so if they have a monster just so happen to have an attribute that you have a fusion monster for in your extra deck, such as an Earth for Shekinaga, something like that, you can get a free fusion monster on your side of the field while triggering a Shaddoll effect, while also removing something from your opponent's side of the field. So this is a really powerful card. Really glad that it's back off the ban list because it works so well with Shaddolls, but yeah, a lot of good interactions here. Now that's it for all the fusion spells. Next off, we're going to go into the rest of the spell lineup. So starting off with the Fusion Recycling Plant. I guess this is a fusion spell, but it's technically a field spell that allows you to search out your Polymerization by just discarding a card, so it's fairly good. And also, during your end phase, you can recover a monster that has used this fusion material from your graveyard back to your hand, which is also kind of nice. You can do this during either player's turn, so if you fuse during your opponent's turn, then during their end phase, you get something back, right? So something like El Shaddoll Fusion, things like that, Super Polymerization, you can still recover something during the end phase, so it just helps you generate that advantage very slowly. This is kind of like a grindy deck. It's not meant to like OTK or anything like that. It's just a really fun deck that's very interactive with your opponent as well. You kind of adapt to the situations that you find yourself in. Now, with my two Fusion Recycling Plants, I'm playing one copy of Terraforming. I'm not playing two because what I found is that if you have a Fusion Recycling Plant up, you don't really want to have multiples in your hand. Really, if I drew into multiple copies, I would just discard it for the search for Polymerization. So I found that, you know, just cutting it down and adding a few more options into my monster lineup and into my spell lineup was way better than just focusing purely on getting Fusion Recycling Plant, especially because this build doesn't require it. It just is nice to have another option to fuse with, like a hard fusion summon, rather than relying on Ostinato and Shaddoll Fusion. Okay, so moving on, we're also playing 3 copies of Call by the Grave, of course, because you don't want your Shaddoll Fusion or Ostinatos getting Ash Blossomed, right? Especially something like Fusion Recycling Plant where you're discarding for a cost as well. So this is just a really, really nice way to foolproof your plays, especially because Ash Blossom is really, really accessible now with the new structure deck that came out. So yeah, there's that. Next off, for the last spell card, we're playing one copy of Monster Reborn. Now, Monster Reborn is really good for bringing back your Shaddoll Fusions, your Melodious Fusions, anything that you really want from your graveyard. Just a really nice tech. One of my favorite spell cards in the game. But yeah, that's going to be it for the spell lineup. Oops, and now we're going to go into the trap lineup, which is only really one card, and we're playing one copy of Shaddoll Core. Now, Shaddoll Core is a card that's not really necessary in the deck, but I really do appreciate its versatility for grabbing back a Shaddoll Fusion or an El Shaddoll Fusion from your graveyard. You can send it off something like Construct, which is really nice. It's also really good to just set and flip over on your turn when it comes back to your turn, so you can fuse with it, especially if you're kind of low on your Shaddoll resources, and this card is just really, really nice. You don't have to play it. Again, you can just replace it with something else, but I find that it's actually really neat in some niche scenarios, so that's why I kept it in. 40 card deck, fairly consistent. I really do like it. It's very fun. So yeah, moving on into the extra deck. Alright, so for the extra deck, starting off, we are playing with some Link monsters. So the generic Link monsters are fairly standard. We're playing one copy of Underclock Taker. This card is fairly decent for this deck because the fact that we're playing both Melodious and Shaddolls, Lights and Darks, we can't reliably get something like Hippo Shinijin or Apprentice Witchling onto our side of the field, so that's kind of why I went for the more generic option with Underclock Taker. Gives me a down arrow, gets rid of anything that might be in my extra monster zone, and I can summon something new under it. It also allows me to kind of attack over higher attack monsters on my opponent's side of the field, especially because, you know, not all the Shaddoll Fusions are really big in terms of attack points. Window only has 2200 attack, for instance, so it's fairly nice to be able to weaken something and then attack over it in the battle phase. So that's why I have the Underclock Taker here. Next off, for the semi-generic Link monster, I have Alistar, the Invoker of Madness. Now, because we're playing, spellcasters that are dark, we're playing light monsters that are fairy, it's fairly easy for us to get the Alistar on the field. I just wanted a generic Link monster that had a bottom left and a bottom right arrow, and the reason for that is this deck can actually pump out extra deck monsters fairly consistently and fairly often, so Underclock Taker's single arrows sometimes is not enough. Getting access to Alistar, which allows you to get 2 other monsters onto your side of the field, is pretty good, especially if one of them is Winda and you have another monster on your side of the field alongside of her as well, right? So I find that Alistar was fairly good, fairly easy to summon too because of the variety that we have in our extra deck and in our main deck. So I found those pretty nice. Now, unfortunately, we aren't playing invocation shenanigans with this. You can always do it for fun if you would like, but yeah. Anyway, next off, we're just playing some of the Nightmare cards. So Cerberus, a Phoenix, Unicorn, right? Pretty standard stuff in the extra deck. Cerberus is actually pretty good this format, so it's pretty nice to have him here. Otherwise, you could have cut him for something else if you really wanted to. Phoenix and Unicorn, of course, spot removal for spell and trap cards and for anything in general. So this is just toolboxing options that you can go into. This deck can actually pump out monsters fairly easily, and you shouldn't be very stingy with your Shaddoll fusion monsters because when they're sent from the field to the graveyard, you can just go ahead and recover, like, your Shaddoll fusions, your El Shaddoll fusions from your graveyard and go for another fusion monster, right? So it's fairly easy to kind of recur those resources. And for the last Link monster I play as one copy of Borrelsword Dragon. You can replace this with Borreload, you can replace this with some other higher end Link monster, mostly because of the fact that it's fairly easy for us to summon Link 4s in this deck because of Ostinato getting us 2 monsters on the field during the end phase, because Shaddolls keep recurring themselves and they have so many effects. So it's fairly easy to summon a monster like this and just push for game. I find that Borrelsword is a little bit more powerful than Borreload in terms of pushing for damage, obviously, but also because this deck has kind of a weakness in terms of they don't really have a monster that's really huge in terms of boss monster. Construct's probably the biggest one. It's only 2,800 attack. So Borrelsword is a great way to help push into a larger field than Borreload can in most cases. So one copy of this is my last Link monster. Okay, so next off, we're going to go into the fusion monsters. So we have our Shaddolls and we have our Melodious Monsters. So we are playing 2 copies of El Shaddoll Winda. Winda we're playing 2 copies of because she's a very easy to access Floodgate monster. It just requires a Shaddoll monster and a Dark monster. So basically you're sending 2 Shaddolls for this summon. Fairly easy to get onto your side of the field and really annoying for your opponent to deal with in some decks, in some cases. Next off, we're playing 1 copy of El Shaddoll Grista and 1 copy of El Shaddoll Shekhanaga. Grista can be summoned with your Ash Blossom. Shekhanaga can be summoned with your Pinkertops. Something like Cerberus, if you really want a hard fusion with like a Cerberus on the field, you can also do that, right? But yeah, Grista is also really nice because of the fact that Salamangreats are very popular, so they have a bunch of fire monsters on your side of the field. You can use Super Polymerization, fuse with a Shaddoll monster, get that Grista onto your side of the field. It is pretty good. But yeah, these 2 cards are one-ofs. They're not really too common in terms of summoning it throughout the duel. You're mostly summoning your Winda or your Construct. So Construct came off the ban list. It's at 1, but hey, it's so easy to access in this deck, especially because we're playing a bunch of light monsters, right? So Construct is really here to, kind of clear off your opponent's board, put some pressure onto your opponent's side of the field as well. Do keep in mind it's a light fairy type monster, so your Chopina can actually recover her from the graveyard, put her back to the extra deck, so that you can basically fuse her again, summon her out to your side of the field, so it's pretty nice. But yeah, 5 Shaddoll fusions, that's going to be it for that. Next off, finishing things off with our Melodious Monsters. So for our Melodious fusions, we have 2 copies of Shuberta, the Melodious Maestra, 1 copy of Bloom Diva, the Melodious Choir, and 1 copy of Bloom Prima, the Melodious Choir. Now, Shuberta's here at 2 because she's the one that's you're most often going to be summoning, especially because Soprano is there to easily access this, and she can reach, 3,000 attacks, so she's going to be a pretty decent beat stick, especially with Arya on your side of the field. So that's definitely really good there. Bloom Diva is here as kind of like a toolboxing kind of thing, so you can clear off your opponent's board if they're kind of trying to stall, if they have a monster that you really can't attack over. This is a great way to destroy it with a card effect that doesn't target or anything. And then Bloom Prima's here as a card that's, not only for Ostinato, but can actually help you push for a lot of damage because of the fact that we can hard fuse for her. So you can actually use more than 2 materials, pump her attack up. If you had a Sonata or something on your side of the field as well, it's pretty useful. Underclock Taker helps this a lot as well. Can attack twice, so you're going to be dealing a lot of damage to your opponent. But yeah, that's going to be it for the extra deck, and that's going to be it for the deck profile. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, or found helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more Melodious content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.